Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Department of Public Policy's conversation series, where we're talking to various change agents that have touched the Price School at different points in time, whether they're alums or they're adjunct professors or partners in research. Today, we're really happy to have Jacob Denney with us, and I'll let him introduce himself and his work a little bit more detail, who was a Price alum who graduated just a couple of years ago. I wanted to just provide some logistics for the conversation. We have a question and answer feature. If you have questions as we go, I will serve as a moderator for those questions. Feel free to just shoot them out there anytime during the conversation. Anything perks your mind. And I also wanted to note that closed captioning is available for those who may require that. So I think we're ready to get started. I had the privilege of both working with Jacob. He was a research assistant in the Price Center for Social Innovation, and also, just being able to interact with him as a faculty member. Jacob, I thought it'd be useful just to talk a little bit about your journey to get to where you were. I know that you worked for a while before you came to the Price School as a Master in Public Policy student. So maybe you could share a little bit about what your motivations were and experiences were that led you to coming to Price.
Sure. So, thanks, Gary, for having me, and folks for jumping on and listening to me talk. It's great to be here and talk to folks about my experience at Price. I worked for a while before I came to Price. I was one of the older students in our cohort. I began my career in politics in Massachusetts. I worked in the state Senate as a legislative aide for a couple of years, and then I moved to Alabama, where I co-founded the Economic Justice Project at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which was a project focused on the ways in which low-income people across the South are exploited or punished because of their economic status. Now, I had no intention of getting an MPP. If you had asked me when I was 21 what degree I was going to get, I would have told you, well, if I was going to go back to school, I'm probably going to be a lawyer. And even at Southern Poverty Law Center, when I was first there, I was like, okay, the next step is I'm going to go to law school. But as I became more involved in the policy realm, digging deeply into issues affecting low-income people, people of color across the country, I realized the gaps in our knowledge weren't on the legal side. We knew what was illegal. The problem was that many of the things that were happening that were very harmful to low-income people and other marginalized communities weren't illegal. We didn't have a good way of speaking to the policymakers in the languages they understood, the language of data, the language of research. And so for me, the opportunity I saw was to jump in and get that kind of quantitative skill set, develop that expertise, and then bring it back to the realm of economic justice and social justice. So for me, the MPP became kind of an obvious choice. And then I spent a lot of time looking around and visiting people, and actually emailed Gary before I came to USC, and then met Gary. And Price became kind of the clear choice for me from there.
That's great, Jacob. Before we get to where your current position is at SPUR and what you've done kind of, post your time at USC, we're hoping that many of our students, both undergraduate and master's students who are with us today, can get a sense of kind of how you charted your journey here at Price. What were the things that, besides kind of the quantitative skills you mentioned, the research skills that you wanted to acquire, what did you do? What kind of skills did you acquire? What did you find most useful? And are there any skills that you wish you had spent a little more time on now that you've taken the next step in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I was at Price, the thing I really wanted to do was build out a toolkit of policy analysis and policy research and policy advocacy. I knew what I didn't know, which helps me kind of chart my path there. And so the things that really stood out for me were the opportunity to study spatial analysis, both at SLAB and in various classes, the opportunity to do the kind of quantitative analysis skills. And that includes both not only the kind of advanced econometrics that TJ teaches, but also just learning how to use data in various programs and platforms. The training I got in Stata in classroom and at the Price Center has been really valuable for me, just to understand and how to manipulate publicly available data sets so I can get at truths in that data that are otherwise not being talked about. Simple things like, I mean, not so simple, but linking large public data sets. There's a project I did at Price Center, actually, where we had a massive collection of databases of data sets for children in low-income children in schools in the Central Valley. And kind of poking at that data taught me a lot of hands-on obvious skills that I still use today. And also the opportunity to do my own research. One of the things that Price was really amazing for was the opportunity to do, I forget the term, but independent research for credit. It's probably actually the term. I did 2 different independent research projects, one with TJ and one with Juliet. And both of those projects allowed me to do a deep dive into areas I was very interested in, while also using the skills I was developing at Price to apply them in that way. That kind of flexibility for me was really important because it allowed me to kind of indulge my interests, but then also get that real world hands-on experience in a topic area and get credit for it at the same time. So those are the things I think that stood out about my time at Price.
Yeah, sounds good, Jacob. I know that I was a beneficiary of your work and, really appreciated what skills you had acquired from the many different faculty members as you started working on projects within the Price Center. I wondered, they're both the kind of initial step out of Price. I know that it's kind of one of those challenges people face, like, am I going to get to the exact right career or am I not? Should I just take a step? What should I do when I first kind of get out there? I want to apply my skills, but what's the right environment there? As you were kind of thinking about that, and of course you had more experience than some of our students have when they enter the program. Did you you have a sense of kind of what you wanted to do as next steps? Were there particular issues, as you had noted about racial justice issues, that were going to continue to guide your journey, or had your journey at Price kind of opened you up to thinking about broader topics as well?
I think the answer is both, right? My time at Price allowed me to, I was guided already by the work I was doing, economic and racial justice work. But my time at Price allowed me to dig in on various policy issues that became really central to that point in my career. So criminal justice reform, the intersection of poverty in the criminal legal system is something that I've worked on throughout my entire career and continue to work on. And my time at Price allowed me to really dig into the complexities of the criminal legal system. And through that, it kind of really steered me into my next job. So after Price, I worked at the Pew Charitable Trusts in the Public Safety Performance Project, helping build out their jail reform and community corrections reform projects as a researcher there. So that was like an immediate next step for me, and was a job that felt like an opportunity to create change, but was a little bit distant from the kind of social justice values that I had been rooted in, raised in, and worked on. So that was like the next job, right? And then from there, I had opportunities to return back to a social justice values, and I took that. I am a person who has worn a lot of hats and had a lot of different roles in my career. And so I went to an organization called the Insight Center, which is a national racial and economic justice research and policy advocacy organization. And I went there as the policy and research director, which was an opportunity that I hadn't been looking for, but came up and was excited about. So I think that to kind of roundabout answer your question, you should look at jobs, in my experience, as opportunities to develop expertise, but then also practice core skills and develop new skill sets. So my job at Pew was a really important job for me because it allowed me to practically use a lot of the hard research tools that Price gave me. I did original econometric research and supervised outside researchers and inside researchers doing kind of advanced statistical analyses. And it really grounded the work I was doing and helped me better understand what kind of work I wanted to do. And that was just a brief period of time. And then I went back into a job that is more of a mixed research and advocacy position.
I wondered if any of those experiences, either at Pew or at Insight, kind of showed what was effective in terms of actually seeing the analysis that you're using get into policymakers' hand that is affecting
Yeah.
the change that, I would say that, the vast majority of our students come here because they want to see change happen. They see things that are not working, and we want to see that change. What were some of the, I guess, practical lessons you've learned since you left Price in terms of what can work, what, maybe doesn't work as well as you hope it does?
I mean, I think I left Price with a real passion and interest in causal research, and then in the practical world saw its limitations. Statistics is hard. The vast majority of policymakers, decision makers, and stakeholders don't understand econometrics or causal research, and can apply it unevenly and incorrectly, right? So that's interpreting other people's research or your own. And the dangers that poses. So that was a big, it was something we talked a lot about at Price, but even as I entered into more evidence-based policy spaces, there was big gaps between people's understanding and ability. And then also I realized that for a lot of people, causal research with limitations was something that they just tuned out because they didn't understand it. So I can make a very compelling case using advanced statistics, but if they didn't understand, right, the statistics, it didn't matter as much. So I think I spent a lot of time learning how to do and conduct like the synthetic control analysis, and nobody understands what that means. And so for me, it was how do I get back to the basics in a way where I can effectively interpret, understand, and then distribute hard, complicated statistical research, but then also how can I use these skills in a way that makes it more understandable to show things like, just descriptive statistics, helping people understand what the data is saying when they read it.
Yeah, and I can imagine that the moment we're in with the pandemic specifically could provide an opportunity for education, widely. It certainly is a case study in my undergraduate policy analysis class where we can see what do you do at a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3, what are you trying to accomplish? And certainly people are making decisions sometimes based on very little evidence, but you still need to make a decision. And so, I think that tiering of evidence is going to become more and more important in the policy dialogue.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what we're seeing is a series of crises unfold, not only the pandemic, but an exposure of the ongoing economic crisis that has kind of defined modern America, and the need for kind of dynamic and immediate interventions, and understanding also the fluidity of good policy, right? How we can do things, learn from it, and then change it quickly.
That's great. So I just wanted to remind the audience to, if you have any questions for Jacob, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I have one final prepared question, and then we can move to more open dialogue. And Jacob, you could even ask me questions for that matter if there are any questions in the Q&A. So you're now at SPUR. For some of us who have been involved with the Bay Area Policy Forum, maybe our second-year students, you may have even been hosted at SPUR, but that might have been the extent of your knowledge or interaction. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and what you're working on?
So it's really interesting. SPUR is a Bay Area policy organization that's about 100 years old. It started, I think, after the earthquake as a organization dedicated to helping build a better San Francisco. And SPUR has been a regional political player, policy player for a very long time, and has had a lot of influence over how we make decisions as it relates to housing, transportation, food and agriculture decisions, a variety of things. One thing SPUR has never really been is a social justice organization or an economic justice organization. And in the past 2 years, a new CEO came on board, Alicia Jean-Baptiste. And Alicia has a vision of building a SPUR and a Bay Area that works for all people. And that vision was very compelling to me. The opportunity to come to an organization that has a very specific laser sharp focus on a region that shapes policy, that has influence, and then also has an interest in changing how they do policy and building a policy framework and practice that focuses on the ways in which low-income people and other marginalized communities are excluded from generating wealth, achieving economic security, or meaningfully participating in the economy.
I wonder if that, I mean, on first glance, it seems almost confusing, I'll be quite honest, that if you're working on transportation policy and housing policy issues, that you didn't have a lens of economic and racial justice embedded, given the history of 100 years of very clear racialized policy making. Was that such something that was implicit but not explicit? Has there been a definite shift in how they actually address issues, do analysis, and then advocate for change?
I think that it has been a shift. I think they were an organization that had a kind of rising tide lifts all boats theory for a long time under previous leadership. And I think that often came at the cost of considerations of marginalized people. And SPUR has now, again, under this new leadership, an evolving board and other people taken on the task of changing how we do policy and how the organization looks at these issues. And so I think that, it's a process for sure, as people learn how to center people who historically are kept out of policy making and policy decision processes. But it's something that we're doing. My work right now, as I'm 2 months into this position, my work right now is shaping up to focus on a variety of issues, one of which includes, depolicing traffic stops and reducing fines dramatically in the Bay Area. How do we make it so that we limit we reduce bias in traffic enforcement, which we know from good data that's coming out is disproportionately put on Black and Latinx people, and then also reduce the impact of fines. Failing to stop at a red light in California when you take a right turn costs $500. So if you're a low income person, $500, I mean, if you're making minimum wage in San Francisco, $500 is 90% of your pre-tax wages in a week. Right. So that completely destabilizes the family. Right. So how do we make it so that fines kind of promote the change we want, right? So people don't make dangerous choices, but then also we don't economically cripple people for months, years, lifetimes while we do it. And how do we make it so that we remove bias from enforcement? And so that's the work I'm doing at SPUR right now, which is not something SPUR would have done a year ago. But there is, I think, that kind of commitment from the organization now.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think a lot of us are working in our work are trying to make sure that we have an explicitly kind of anti-racist approach in the work, and it's not just kind of either passive or just making sure that we're not, we're being inclusive, and so there's just kind of different orientations around that. So it's exciting to hear what that work is. I guess I did have one just small question. Just curious about the organization in your own work. How much time do you find, given the questions that you're addressing? It sounds like they could be kind of focused on the Bay Area, but how often do you engage with people at the state level, since so much of our policy is embedded at all levels of government? And then perhaps do you spend any time advocating at the federal level as well?
Yeah, so we call ourselves a Bay Area organization that engages with the state and federal government as necessary to affect the change we want to see in the Bay, right? So what I just described as a desire to kind of depolice traffic and reduce fines, we can't just unilaterally do that in San Francisco or Oakland or San Jose. We have to go to the state. So we are partnering, we're both coalition building, so building out a broad coalition of economic justice, transit advocacy, and other groups to build a statewide coalition to advocate for these reforms, and also going in and talking to legislators, partnering with them, serving as the kind of in-house experts that a lot of legislators need as they engage with policymaking. And it's something similar at the federal level as well. We spend probably less time talking to the feds, but we try to engage as much as we can with them and be a part of a network of national, federal advocacy organizations so they can activate us when need be, and we can reach out to our regional representatives.
Very good. Well, again, just remind our audience, if there's anybody that has any questions for Jacob, please feel free to ask. There's nothing immediately there, but it'll start to come in now that oh, here we go. We have our first official question. So what advice do you have to first-gen Price students still finding their way and trying to understand the various avenues they may have, either through an MPA or an MPP?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a first generation student, and well, I guess that's not true. I am the first. My parents went to college. They're the first people in their family to go to college. They're the only people in their family in their college. I'm the only person of my generation out of, I think, 15 cousins who went to college. And so I had often a similar question of how do we do this? How does this work? What are these processes? I think my best advice for figuring that out is actually through internships, which is a very difficult thing to navigate. I got my undergraduate degree without ever having an internship. I worked full time through undergraduate and then realized that I needed to have a different kind of experience. So I would encourage folks at USC and at Price to tap into the networks that exist within kind of the Trojan network, but then also the experts that you have in the university who can help you find those internships. And then I think, talking to people. I've actually, through Price, through Price faculty, had a lot of conversations with incoming Price MPP or MPA students about my career, the path I've taken, and then opportunities for them, or just general advice. And I'm sure there are many other Price alumni who have much better advice than I have, who you can tap into as well. But those networks exist. We're all happy to talk to people. We are in this world because we care about people and we want them to succeed. So I think, using the resources you have and reaching out to us and knowing that we want to talk to you is important. So I'm happy if anyone wants to contact me. You can get my contact information from Gary or Stacia, and I'm happy to have any conversations.
Thanks, Jacob. And as we wait for another question, is there any other specific advice that you give folks, either who are transitioning from undergrad or grad, that you had on top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think working is really important. If you are leaving undergrad and debating going straight to grad school or taking some time to work, I would encourage everyone to work. I think that you gain a level of expertise and understanding of what you need and what kind of toolkits you need. Again, I'm a person who just thought I was going to go to law school. That was going to be what I was going to do. And then my work experience showed me a different opportunity and pathway. So that's one. I think it's important. If you're in graduate school, I would say that take advantage of the resources and opportunities you have. I think that the directed research I did at Price was really important for me and my experience in grad school. Working at the Price Center was something that was really, really valuable for me. It allowed me to hone the skills I was learning in real time and apply them to the kind of policy work and research that the Price Center was doing. And then also, I think, internships matter and give you an opportunity to kind of do the buffet style of careers and organizations. Mm-hmm. There are people I know who said they would never want to work in government and then did an internship with a government agency and are now, 5 years into government jobs or however many. And I think that helps you figure out a little bit of what you want to do and also build out your network.
So I told you I'd give you the chance to ask me a question if you wanted, but you may or may not have prepared something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested. One of the things that brought me to Price was a kind of explicit commitment to social justice, which I think you expressed to me, Gary. We're now in a moment nationally where social and racial justice and economic justice continues to move to the forefront of national conversations, and people who previously were not engaged are becoming more and more engaged. My own organization being an example. So I'm interested to hear if anything has happened at Price since the time I left that has continued to build on this legacy of social and racial justice, centering it in both the degree programs and then also just broadly in the community.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is some you could point to specific work of either the Price Center, you can focus on specific curriculum that we've developed. But I think that it's probably most important to focus on the work broadly of the school that LaVonna Lewis leads as our Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, because it provides the overall framework and North Star, if you will, so that you can see that in order to to create a community at Price where we center our work on racial justice, we actually need to do that from all the way up to, kind of like the dean's office to the curricular design. And then as we actually engage on even conversations and events, do we have representation? Do we actually have perspectives? And so we've been doing little things like syllabi review. Are we actually reading from diverse sets of authors, or are we just reading, quote unquote, the classics? And then, they just happen to be a bunch of white professors that had written, 50 years ago. And, each one of those steps is essential. And I think, you can point to different classes and different places where we've made more progress, and some that we've made less progress. But I think that the fact that we do actually have an organizational structure now where we actually put out, here is our strategic plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here are the steps to get there. You have to have accountability. And if you don't have that, where we can say, wow, did we make the right hires? Did we reach out to students in the right way? Then we're not going to accomplish that goal. So we're at the point where, even though we started those efforts prior to the pandemic, I think, just like I said, in terms of our own Price Center work, we've had to refocus, and we're going to go through our own strategic process to make sure that we're being explicitly anti-racist in the way that we engage with our communities, the way we do research, the way we select topics to really focus on. And I think through that, we'll be able to, I think, achieve our mission much, much more effectively.
That's great. That's really exciting to hear that you are doing that full gamut from the small stuff to the big things. Because I think that's just what we need to do, right? I mean, building all of our institutions into anti-racist organizations, institutions. Yeah. And that's exciting. And you have I'm forever indebted to the men faculty of Price, and excited to hear that.
Well, thank you. I guess one last question. Another one did not come in yet, but I was just curious how, your own organization, your own career has been impacted by the pandemic, how it has changed how you've tried to engage with policymakers who may be in crisis mode. Are things sort of pause with kind of, oh, well, there's disproportionality and stop, so we can't worry about that now because we're worrying about public health. How have you felt that tension of what have been evidence of racial injustice, and then now, of course, the pandemic has only exposed, as you noted before, the economic disparities that exist and other fissures of racial injustice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that policymakers generally are in crisis mode, but are also seeking solutions, both in the short term and in the long term. And I think policymakers understand what's happening, right? That we are exposing multiple crises at the same time, a crisis of kind of police violence, economic crisis, as well as a pandemic. And they want solutions to all these things. And there's a growing interest and appetite for how do we develop these tiered solutions, right? What can we do now and what can we build towards in the future? And how do we do that? And I don't think it's slowed. I think it's in some ways sped up because there is a more dynamic need. We have a legislative session that's going to begin next year, and lawmakers are committed to doing things in it. I think we have a political moment to do a lot of exciting and compelling things, and an opportunity to reframe different things like the role of government in supporting people in the state and region. So I think the work continues. If under extenuating circumstances. I haven't met any of my coworkers. For example, I started this job, from my kitchen table, and continue it there.
Still there.
Yeah.
Well, on that optimistic note about the work that's before us and the work that we can do together, I'd like to conclude this conversation. Once again, thank you so much, Jacob, for joining us today. And for our Price community, we'll be having these conversations about once a month. If you have suggestions for who we should include, please let me or Station know, and we'd be happy to bring that conversation to you. So
Great.
take care, Jacob.
Thanks so much, Gary.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.